Hello, welcome back, and this is another one of my videos on World Suicide Prevention Day 2019. My name is Matthew Mckenzie, and I'm an unpaid carer caring for a close relative. Now, what is Suicide Prevention Day? Well, basically, it's an awareness day, really observed usually on September the 10th every year. And usually it's in order to provide, let's say, a worldwide commitment and a way to look into preventing suicides. Now, you can call it WSPD, or I would say World Suicide Prevention Day, and it's usually set by an organization. I think it's called International Association for Suicide Prevention, where we have also the World Health Organization that is also sponsoring the day. So we have two big global organizations. And I think the theme for 2019 is called Working Together to Prevent Suicide. Now, both the World Health Organization and the International Association for Suicide Prevention work with governments globally and also other organizations to ensure that suicide is no longer stigmatized or penalized, although they're heavily focused on suicide prevention. And if I can remember, if I can look into what some of their aims are, both these organizations, that being the World Health Organization and the International Association for Suicide Prevention, their aims obviously is to raise awareness of the risks of suicide and to look into funding suicide research schemes and policies, develop suicide prevention policies. Usually the causes of suicide, though, are very complex, even though some of them are fairly well known. I still find them quite complex in society, and I'll get on to a bit about that in a moment. The reasons why there's a global drive on suicide prevention is the statistics are quite astonishing. It's believed that a person usually takes their life, usually, I think it's every 40 seconds. I forgot to mention this at the start of the video. I have to apologize. This video can be triggering, but I will put at the end of the video ways to seek help if you find the video quite distressing. Now, as I was just talking about, as I said, it's quite astounding, basically. Usually every 40 seconds, a person takes their life. I will probably talk about how it's such a devastating leading cause of death worldwide. Usually, we also have, I think it's around above 20 times that there is a suicide attempt. And I believe that the World Health Organization have noted that suicides usually occur, I mean, they've done a lot of research on this, but usually occur between certain ages groups between, I think it's 15 and 30. But because I'm from London, I tend to want to focus also on the UK, and we have many organizations that are tackling the causes of suicide and leading the fight to develop suicide prevention strategies. And there are many of them, like, for instance, we have Rethink Mental Illness, big mental health organizations like Mind. We also have Heads Together. I think that's backed by the Royal Family. Grassroots Suicide Prevention, Mates in Mind, aimed at tackling suicide prevention between men, and I'll talk a bit more about that. Papyrus, which is a leading charity helping young people against suicide. That, they can be, I would say, the forgotten age group because they can't easily explain their feelings, and they're living in a completely different community. I could say we also have the NHS, Health Watch, and also Network Rail. Oddly enough, you might find, well, hang on, that's not like a mental health organization, but when you think about it, quite a lot of suicides, unfortunately, can be done in a situation where Network Rail has to step in and raise awareness and work with mental health organizations to reduce the causes of suicide. Now, for the UK, I think basically a lot of these mental health organizations, charities, are part, from what I know, of a national suicide prevention alliance. And basically it's an England-wide coalition which is working to reduce suicide in England. You can search them up on the web. You can actually, I think you can become a member of the NSPA for free. So it's worth checking up on what they do and how they're tackling the causes of suicide. If I can just move on towards the facts of suicide, as I was mentioning before, I wanted to raise a bit more awareness on the causes. Right? I think there's a lot of suicide triggers. Obviously, one of the main causes is poverty, which unfortunately is quite rife in the UK due to a lot of austerity measures. And the austerity measures, as we know, tend to hit the most vulnerable in society, especially those suffering from mental illness. Austerity, again, sorry if this sounds political, but it can lead to unemployment, and that's another trigger to suicide. It can also look into loss of a loved one, common things as well. A heated argument can actually lead to triggers on suicide, especially if they're happening often. And other things which one might not think can lead to suicide triggers is work related issues. We spend most of our lives working, but who's to know when you're at work you're not suffering from things that are not going right. Staff are not treating each other with respect and courtesy, and sometimes it can lead to bullying. We also have, this must also be raised, but we also have triggers regarding people's identity, especially with the LGBT, that'd be lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, especially young people as well. Who feel, and not just feel, but the families may reject them or do not accept them because of their identity, and this can extend to the community. So again, that's a high trigger in regards to suicidal behavior. When I say trigger, something that would cause a person to attempt suicide. And it's not just those factors as well. We also have isolation from the community, which is actually quite common in today's society. We usually live our busy lives and not knowing what on earth our neighbour is doing. We spend most of our time on the TV, on our computer. I'm guilty of that, on the phone, on a tablet. But it's not just that. I think in community, we just tend to get on and just do what we feel is best for ourselves and not really take the time to listen to others who can be ostracized from the community, be it better for better or worse, I don't know. It is a community issue when one wants to tackle suicide, and it's usually everyone's business. No one should really suffer alone, and together I feel people can actually fight suicide and reach out to others, especially when they are in need. I feel, and this also must come from the NHS, I feel that everyone has something to contribute, no matter how large or small. With with mental health, especially those suffering depression, those are at a higher risk of suicide behaviors. But the problem with depression is, how can someone with depression know they are at risk because they already have what you could consider, a mental health issue. So my other thoughts on suicide prevention is, I would say, from sociologists to health professionals and economists to researchers, they also have a large part to play in understanding suicide, especially when it comes to social pressures. It's also have an effect on suicide triggers. A lot of suicides, do come from how societies are formed, how the communities are formed, what is pressuring the groups within that area. Unfortunately, suicide, discussing suicide is still a taboo subject and can be rather complex in the community. People just do not want to talk about it. It's really depressing, and that I understand. And, you just cannot look into someone's mind to a point and have an idea that they are at risk. You can never fully tell. I mean, to a point, perhaps someone's behavior, but, when people discuss someone that they've known that has committed suicide, probably one of the first things they might say is that looking at that person, you can never tell that they were going to do it. So I'd just like to just confirm that and repeat that you can never really tell, not easily anyway, when someone is at risk. So this is why it's really important that people need to listen when someone does decide to open up, because when someone does feel that the time is right and they feel, there's a lot on the line for them, especially if they're male, and it's very hard for them to do that because they feel they're vulnerable. But it's really important that we still try and listen anyway. So I don't want to preach. I want to talk on a bit more about, my thoughts on suicide prevention and the National Global Awareness Suicide Prevention Day. Now, talking that, as I've mentioned, as a male, I'm certainly aware and I've experienced situation, I suppose, on why men are more likely to take their life. At the back of my mind, I feel some men can be very competitive in nature, I suppose, and often see opportunities to try and get the better of everyone. Now, I'm not saying competition's a bad thing, but, it's it can be an issue if someone feels that opening up is weak or bringing others down is strong. Now, that's basically my view in a nutshell, on why I feel the situation in suicide in men is more likely higher than women, who are more likely, with women who are more likely going to talk about this situation, while men might just deal with it until it becomes what you call reaching a breaking point. And not to say that it's sometimes men's fault. It can be also upbringing. It can actually even be social norms. It can be an unconscious way on how we feel men should behave. I want to move on to families and carers. As you know, I've mentioned I'm a carer myself. And families and carers can be just at risk, especially after someone in the family has taken their life, or someone that they were trying to care for suffering mental illness, and that person has succumbed to the mental illness. Now, people who usually have been bereaved by suicide, as I mentioned, can actually take their own life. It can be a suicide trigger. So it's important, if you're a carer, an unpaid carer, to try and talk to someone, especially someone close, who will take the time to listen to you. And that's something I also want to mention to men. If they're going to open up. You can't just tell any old person. You can't. You have to be choosy on who you speak to. If someone very close who's not going to take the opportunity to seek advantage from it or gossip, if you know what I mean, or see you as weak. So one way is to seek support and help, be it with a young man or unpaid carer, is there are support and awareness groups out there. One thing I want to offer out of this video is that there's I think it's an organization called Support After Suicide, and on their website, I think it's supportaftersuicide.org.uk. you can actually put in your postcode and it will list up several suicide prevention or support groups in your area. On the other side of it, if you want to be one of those that tackle suicide triggers and fight the cause on suicide prevention, you can actually just write about your experiences, blog, even learn about suicide prevention. Basically, it's just educating yourself, educating others. We all have something to contribute. You can also try and help reduce the stigma. It's very hard to reduce the stigma anyway. I mean, used to say that what I'm saying doesn't cause someone to feel down and depressed, even though the intentions are good. Try and educate yourself, as I mentioned. On World Suicide Prevention Day, there are a number of events that are happening. You can check out on your site. And the most common one that I would say is, if someone does open up to you about how they're feeling, be kind. Don't try to give advice if you can. Just try and listen. It's not easy. No one's going to be the expert. We're human. We all will make mistakes. There's no doubt about that. But listening is one of the most common things you can do if someone does decide to open up about what's happening to them. And if you are on the other scale, suffering from suicidal thoughts, suicidal triggers, certainly try and seek help. Even though I said not to offer advice, is one of the golden sort of schemes of things is that we all wish those suffering suicidal thoughts, suicidal behavior is to try and seek help. Lastly, as I mentioned, this video can be triggering, and I'm sorry for that, but if you do feel the video has been quite upsetting, certainly try and ring the Samaritans if you do need help. I believe the number is 116 123, and it doesn't cost a thing to do that. For men, you got Calm, that's 0800 585 858, and for young people, I think it's Papyrus, which is 0800 968 4141. I hope the video has raised some awareness, and I hope that even if nothing else comes of it, that you could just try and spread the words, or might raise some thoughts about what is suicide prevention. But I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to drop by and watching this video, and look out for more videos in future on mental health and carers.